Well, I'm pleased to welcome to the programme now Ciarán Donnelly. He is the Senior Vice President of International Programmes at the NGO International Rescue Committee. He joined us on the programme live from New York. Hello to you, sir. Thanks for making the time.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Look, this is the fourth day now of these intensified Israeli bombardments of Lebanon. For your organisation, for your staff on the ground, what's the most pressing issue right now?
So we have 350 staff from the International Rescue Committee in Lebanon. The vast majority of those are Lebanese. And they have two priorities right now. One is staying safe, and the second is figuring out how to respond to the emerging humanitarian needs that we're seeing. We've had several staff members and some of our local civil society partners directly impacted, had to flee and seek safety as their homes have been impacted by the unfolding attacks. But at the same time, our teams are rallying and mobilizing, conducting needs assessments to figure out how can we best support those families who are being displaced, whose homes have been destroyed, and who are seeking safety in different parts of the country. We're very worried about what the coming days will hold. We've already seen over 100,000 people displaced. That means thousands of families like the one that your report just showed, seeking safety with no idea of where they're going to be able to sleep for the night. And our focus in the coming days is going to be on providing support to those as best as we can.
Indeed. And I wonder whether you think Lebanon has the infrastructure to deal with that number of displaced people. Of course, this is a country that has been grappling long before this current round of fighting with an enormous economic crisis, the effective collapse of its currency. So what resources are in place now to make sure that these people, as you said, over 100,000 people in the last 5 days, get what they need? Do they have the basics at the moment?
So, as you say, Lebanon has been struggling with economic crisis, with a real public service crisis for many years. In addition to the Lebanese population, there was over 1 million Syrian refugees living in Lebanon, which adds further to the strain on local services. Humanitarian organizations and local civil society have been critical in supporting Lebanese civilians and Syrian refugees over the last number of years. The displacement, and particularly if it continues at the pace and scale that we've seen over the last few days, is only going to put more burden on those. Lebanese society is very strong. Lebanese people are very resilient and very welcoming of those who've been displaced, but there are limits to how much they're able to do. We can, as humanitarians, in partnership with our Lebanese partners, we're able to scale up our programs, but really what's needed is for a halt to the attacks, for a ceasefire, to allow for de-escalation. That's really the only way to prevent the humanitarian situation becoming an all-out catastrophe over the coming days and weeks.
Indeed, I was going to ask you about that because you are in New York, where the United Nations General Assembly taking place this week. There are efforts, we understand, at the United Nations to try and secure a ceasefire, though we are hearing from the Israeli Foreign Minister today that that isn't on the cards for them for the moment. For you, from a humanitarian perspective, how important is it that such a ceasefire deal is found soon? And look, what happens if it isn't?
Look, a ceasefire is imperative. It is the best and the only way to keep civilians safe, to allow aid agencies and local groups the access and the space needed to be able to scale up effort, and to prevent what could become a much deeper humanitarian catastrophe in Lebanon, but also potentially wider regional destabilization. Leaders who are here in New York this week, the assembled world leaders, have it within their power to forge that kind of agreement, to bring about diplomatic talks towards a ceasefire and to bring an end to ongoing hostilities. And that really has to be their focus. Lebanese civilians, Syrian refugees, people across the region can't afford for global political leaders to look away from this crisis during this week.
I'd like to ask you as well, if I can, about what's happening in the Gaza Strip, the humanitarian crisis there, because while we are talking about Lebanon, that's of course the latest news, we're approaching a year of war in Gaza. Is your organisation, the IRC, still able to operate in Gaza?
We are still operating in Gaza. We've been increasing the scale of our work there in recent months. We have teams on the ground. We also have a strong set of partnerships with local Palestinian organizations in Gaza. We're providing emergency medical care, specialized services for women and children, and a range of other programs to address the needs there. As in Lebanon, echoing the comments I just made, What we see in Gaza is a continuing conflict that endangers the lives of civilians and is perpetuating a humanitarian disaster. A ceasefire, an immediate and lasting ceasefire, really is necessary to prevent further harm to civilians, allow aid agencies to be able to scale up and access support services, and of course in that context as well to set the conditions under which hostages are able to return home.
Ciarán Donnelly talking to us there from the International Rescue Committee live in New York. Thank you very much indeed.